This is Red Ice Radio. From the visible to the obscure. RedIceCreations.com.
Thank you for tuning in today. You are listening to Red Ice Radio. My name is Henrik Palmgren and our website is RedIceCreations.com. Wherever you are listening from around the world, a warm welcome to everyone. I hope you're doing well and ready for another important 2-hour radio program. We have Josh Reeves with us from theglobalreality.com. He's a filmmaker, researcher, and radio host. He is behind the film The Secret Right, Volume 1, a film that investigates the secretive right-wing organization called the Council for National Policy, the CNP. It was founded in 1981 by the Reverend Tim LaHaye as a networking tool for leading U.S. conservative political leaders, financiers, and religious right activist leaders. We are going to begin to discuss the connection that the CNP has to the sovereign military order of the Knights of Malta, the Knights Templar, the Jesuits, but maybe more importantly we'll discuss the ties that the CNP has to the alternative media. This is going to be really interesting. We're going to begin at one end here and run through the full spectrum, if you will, and let the research lead us in an effort to try to answer why and how humanity has been controlled with the crown and the cross for such a long time. Welcome to Red Ice Radio, Josh Reeves. It is great to have you with us here today on the program. First of all, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it. How are you today, Josh?
I'm all right, Henrik, and thanks so much for having me on. It's a great honor for me to be here on Red Ice Radio because I've been a listener and a subscriber to the network for a long time, and have actually played some of your interviews and stuff on my network before. And I've also interviewed Michael Desarian about 5 times, and you've worked and done great work with him over the past several years. So I'm just excited to be here and be able to talk to your audience about the things that I research and talk about on my show and my film. So thank you again for having me. Absolutely.
We really appreciate it. It's going to be a lot of fun talking with you. You're behind the global reality, of course. You have your own radio show. You're making films like The Secret Right, of course. We'll get into that a little bit later as well. And you have different parts to it. I guess you're still working on part 2 upcoming. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm actually working on that now and hoping to have that out by sometime in August. And we're going to do probably like a small release and kind of release parts of it, and then we're going to have a big full release after that. It's turned into a monster, Henrik, because there was so much information I had when I first started making part 2, and then it just seems that every day there's new information coming out, there's more stuff coming out, and I try to get as much new stuff into the films as I can as they're coming out. Literally, after we put the day after the first film came out, which deals with a lot of the topics of these, different right-wing groups and stuff like that. We had the actual Tea Party group start the day after the film, the first part of the film came out. And, it was already had exposed a lot of these people like Dick Armey and others who had started the Tea Party, and their involvement in some of these globalist organizations. So it was just the timing of that and all that's transpired now. It's just turned into a much bigger monster than I thought. So in this film, we're going to get a little bit deeper into, things like the Jesuits, and we're going to get a little bit deeper into some of the things that these groups have been involved in. But I'm excited about the film. I'm excited for people to see it. So, it'll be out very soon.
Absolutely. Excellent. We're going to talk a little bit about the first one here, obviously, as well. And what you've been doing is obviously looking behind the curtain a little bit of the alternative media as well, quite a bit in your research. Tell us here at the outset, Josh, a little bit more about the global reality and briefly, obviously, how you got into it as well.
Well, absolutely, and that's the whole looking into of the alternative media and all this stuff it's not something I ever set out to do. It was something that completely happened by accident and by happenstance, because I was very much when I started my radio show, I was very much in what you would consider the mainstream of the truth movement. I was very much a fan of people like Alex Jones and David Icke and other people like that, and that's really how I woke up. I woke up when I was in high school. I'm just turned 35 today. Today is my birthday.
Happy birthday, Josh.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And, when I was about 16 or so, 15 or 16, I read, it was just so odd. The library in the little school I went to was way out in the country, and there was only about 30 or 35 people in my class. But for some odd reason, they had a copy of Jim Marr's book Crossfire that deals with the John F. Kennedy conspiracy. And this was in our library, and so I got a copy of this. And it just blew my mind. And at that time I was, being a young guy, I was listening to a lot of, rock music. I was listening to stuff like, Megadeth and Rush. And I didn't really realize until later that those lyrics were talking about these type of topics and kind of probably influenced me to look into that. So I had read Jim Marrs' Crossfire, and I'd sort of been in what you would call, conspiracy research for a lot of years. But it wasn't until after 9/11, I was working for a software company at that time, and was making pretty good money. And then after 9/11 happened, I saw the mechanisms that were happening around me. My job got shipped off to another country. I saw things, and finally I was just like, you know what? I've got to start trying to do something. At that time, right after 9/11, I didn't know what that something would be. I just kept researching and trying to learn more and everything else. And then, in about 2006 or so, I decided I wanted to make a documentary film. I was going to make this documentary film, which I still haven't made yet because I've been busy with all these other things. And it was going to be on, it was basically going to set the record straight on secret societies, because for years I felt like I had heard, all these different, rumors and things about secret societies, some probably very true, other stuff not true at all. And so I kind of set out to disprove that. But somewhere along the way, the film ended up turning into a 9/11 film, because I had all this other stuff about 9/11. So in 2007, I came out with my first film. It's called 9/11 New World Rising. And I had a premiere in Dallas for that film. And then just a few short weeks after that, I started my radio show. And again, like I said, I was very much a supporter of Alex Jones and those type of people at that time. And I started my radio show, and the third show that I ever did, we've been planning on having former Canadian diplomat and author Peter Dale Scott on my show at our premiere in Dallas for the film. And he couldn't make it, and so I was like, there I was doing a radio show. I had like a 1 hour show at that time. I just started, and he emailed me, and I said, hey, I've got a radio show now. Would you like to come on? And he said, sure. So Peter Dale Scott came on. That was huge for me, big guest. Just my third show in. I was really a rookie and not that good at doing radio yet. But during the interview, Professor Scott had mentioned this group. I started mentioning groups like the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderberg Group and stuff. And he said, well, there's this other group you should look into, and they're way more secretive, way more powerful, and a lot less people know about them. And they don't really have, the CFR doesn't really have the power they used to have anymore. This group's way more powerful, and they control things like Blackwater, and they're involved in the military-industrial complex. And he said the name of the group, and I couldn't really understand him that well. And I went back to the rebroadcast over that weekend and listened. He said, oh, the CNP, the Council for National Policy. Okay. So I go and I start looking up this group, because he said that they had affiliations in Dallas, where I live. That's my hometown. So I was going, wow, I'm definitely intrigued like this, because, Henrik, I felt that, as a lot of people do, that was the whole reason why I wanted to do a show at that time. I felt that I'd been doing a lot of research for a lot of years, and that I had a pretty good handle on this stuff. And I mean, I couldn't have been any more wrong about that. It turns out that, as much as I knew at that time, turns out that I didn't know nearly as much as I thought that I did. And every day I learned more. And so I'm going and I'm researching this group, the Council for National Policy. And I come to find out that the strangest thing about it, Henrik, as soon as I start researching it and trying to find people who are involved, because it's very secretive, they meet 3 times a year. In total secrecy. They meet in posh hotels. They don't make their membership lists available to the public. And, I was sort of saying, well, why aren't there people staking this thing out like they do the Bilderberg group meetings?
That's right.
And, it just seemed very odd to me that nobody was doing that. And so I started finding, what I could find. They don't make their current membership lists public, but we are able to get past membership lists. And then there's other times when people who are currently members just admit that they're members. And so I found this very interesting thing where it seems like people who are kind of on the lower level are openly, freely admitting the group and saying that, hey, this is what we're doing. And then other people are very secretive about it. But the biggest thing that stuck out like a sore thumb for me was that I started noticing immediately that all these different names of people who I had heard on the Alex Jones show through the years, people like Dr. Stan Monteith and Pat Buchanan and Larry Pratt from Gun Owners of America, just on and on and on. I mean, it was just one after another. Jack McLam. I just, not one name, not 2 names, not 3 names, but 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 names of people who were members of this secretive group that was started by the Hunt Oil brothers, who are Knights of Malta members as well. And they were the ones that paid for the Wanted for Treason posters that were published in Dallas, Texas, the day before the Kennedy assassination in 1963. And I started saying, this is, you know, this is connected to the highest levels here.
Yeah.
And then I started finding Rothschilds in the group. I started finding DuPonts in the group. I started finding more and more people that seemed to be, like Phyllis Schlafly, for instance, connected to these various bloodlines of the elite. And, something was really, really shaken in me by that, Henrik. I was rather dismayed. I mean, I couldn't sleep for 3 or 4 days. I was really freaking out because, and I showed it to another fellow radio host at that time. And I said, you know, can you look at this for me? You know, can you just take a look at this information and tell me what you think about it? And, the person said to me, yeah, you know, if this is what you think it is, this could be very interesting. And, so that's sort of what it led me, Henrik, into not really, I was never sent out to look into the alternative media or anything else like that, or never sent out to try and be one of these, because there's a lot of people out there that claim to be exposers of people, and a lot of what they claim to expose is just it's just loose stuff. I mean, there's a lot of people that say bad things about Alex Jones and other people, and they're just not based in reality. They're not based in fact at all. And I think that's dangerous, because I never set out to be someone who's trying to chastise somebody else's work or say anything else at all. But there are some serious connections with that go right up to the very top of the quote unquote New World Order of the Illuminati, and they're connected to this group. And it seemed to me there's been such a moratorium on talking about it that, to me, I inherently knew there was something behind it.
Well, absolutely. That's really interesting. And I think that I like what you say earlier as well, that we never have the full picture, it seems. Again, those who are willing to continue their research and not stop at one point, obviously know that there's more behind the surface. It's an onion with, infinite layers, if you will. And, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper all the time.
That's what I like about your show, is because, you're not really judgmental on people and their information. I mean, you just allow people to come up here, and put out their information, regardless of whether or not you agree with it 100% or don't agree with it or anything else.
That's right.
You're just providing people with a platform. And I think that to me is the most important thing for any of us to be doing. Just regardless of whether you agree with something or I agree with it, let's put it out there on the court of public opinion and let people decide for themselves what's real or not. And that's all I've ever asked people to do with this information as well, Henrik.
Absolutely. That's a really good strategy in that sense. Let the, listeners decide. There's no reason to, not go anywhere or censor obviously certain things. That's obviously, not something that is of all at interest. I think that the most important thing is to try to get as much, varied information as you can, as you're aware of, because that's another thing as well that I notice, among some critics out there, if you will, as well, Josh. They don't leave any room for the fact that it might actually be such that you don't know about it, because how can we don't know everything. We don't have all the capabilities that everyone else has, or the time to look into certain details about certain little groups here and there. But instead, I guess what I'm saying is that instead of just being criticized for that, why not just bring it to people's attention in the same way that you have? But I totally agree with you, Josh, what you said about the Bilderberg focus, the focus on Skull and Bones and the Bohemian Grove, when we have many different groups behind the scenes doing many different things as well. And there seems to be an overrepresentation, I guess, you're saying as well, on just focusing on certain groups, when there is tons of groups out there, different agendas, different people that are striving for different things. And this is about, I guess, as well, kind of balancing the picture a little bit, knowing who's behind what and who's saying what, basically. Right, Josh?
That's the whole thing is for me, Henrik, because that's why when I started my radio show, that's why I called it the global reality, is because, I started noticing that it seemed that people were kind of putting this focus in America that, this whole New World Order stuff, where all this stuff was only happening in the United States. And that's just flat not true. It's happening all over the world, and it's affecting everyone globally. So the reality that we face is not just a reality that is compartmentalized to one specific country or one area. This is a reality that is global, and it affects everybody, and we all need to know about that. So when I first started getting into this stuff, I got into it because of the research, and because I felt like the information needed to be, looked into farther, and we didn't have the whole picture. And when I started noticing, even before I found out about the Council for National Policy and sort of this information we're talking about, I started noticing I couldn't understand why, sort of the focus of like the truth movement in the United States was sort of, you'd have people talking about, their guns and their ammo and their weapons. And I'm going, what does this have to do with research? I didn't sign up to be some, some survivalist or some crazy, person who wants to hunker down in their bunker. Just something seemed odd about that to me. And, I think that very much ties into this information, exactly what you're talking about. I'm not trying to say that the Council for National Policy is more powerful than any other group, or there's one, specific group in control. But one of the things that has come to my attention over the past 4 years of researching this is that all of the information that really is the deeper elements of this, I would say stuff like the, Sumerian texts, like Anunnaki stuff, Jesuit information, all of this information that is kind of left out. I think with intent it's been left out so that people don't see the great picture. They see a little bit of the picture, but they don't see the whole picture. And when you have the rest of this information, it makes the whole much larger picture seem a lot more clear to you. And I started noticing that there was this sort of this moratorium on I noticed it on your network and stuff in the past, where people would come on and kind of get mad at you guys or have a problem with you guys because you guys would talk about, ancient aliens, or you would talk about extraterrestrials and the possibility of this seeding life on the planet. And some people had a problem with you guys talking about that. And I always wondered about that. I just said, it seems very strange to me that these certain topics are taboo to certain individuals. And I think that now with a lot of the research I've done, we can have a better idea why that is.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's just basically an arrogance. And obviously this is an unwillingness for certain people to go in that direction. And just because they have made their minds up doesn't mean that everybody else has. And there's always more to the story. And there's always more that they probably have shut down to and don't realize about these kinds of topics as well. And furthermore, why are they even interested in controlling what everybody else is supposed to hear or listen to anyway? If they just let go of their control freak nature that they have and just let people decide for themselves, what's the problem with that? And furthermore, how does that then make them any different than the people that are trying to criticize, that are at the top of the New World Order, that are trying to control the whole global population? They're just a micro version of that, Josh.
No, I couldn't agree more. My research totally backs that statement right there up. They are a microcosm of that, because I've seen the same kind of thing happen. It's almost this dogmatic attitude. It's like you can be a part of the club, you can be a part of the truth movement, whatever, but you have to think the way we do. You have to have the same opinions, and if you don't have those same opinions, then we're gonna ostracize you. We're gonna call you a plant. We're gonna call you a fed, whatever else, just because you don't see things the way that the intelligentsia of the truth movement sees them. I mean, I had a big problem with that, and that's why I stopped working with the local 9/11 group I was working with, because we started bringing in information that was sort of wider picture, and they just didn't want to have it. They wanted to focus on everything that had to do with 9/11, and that was it. And to me, that sort of seemed like, while 9/11 is a very important issue, as you mentioned earlier, it's, as with any of this stuff, it's not the only issue. So the only way we're going to gain a greater perspective is by looking at everything. That's
absolutely right. And dogmatic people seem to kind of cling to certain organizations and groups and what have you. Yep. And I've never been about that. For me, it's always been about follow the path, whatever, that leads down to. And if, even if I went on a wrong path, then that I consequently understand afterwards, what's the problem with that? Then I've become wiser in the process. I've understood that now, and I now move on in a new direction. So no problem at all. It's nothing. There's no worries, but this is like this life and death every time just because you read a book about the Anunnaki, Come on,
I understand.
People.
Yeah,
Relax,
no, I understand, because it's the same way for me. I constantly change, what I believe, Henrik. I mean, what I'm believing is not a static thing. It's constantly ever changing. Some of the things that I believed 6 months ago, a year ago, are totally different than what I believe now, because the research, new information is always constantly coming in, and there's been, there's just been little things, little tidbits come at you, and you pick up on that and you go, oh, because for me, I had heard a lot about, talking about these topics that seem to be kind of taboo. I had heard, for years this stuff about the Jesuits and about, the Knights of Malta and sort of that whole, end of things. But I never really saw a lot of information on it or a lot of research on it. So I kind of, like everybody else, kind of dismissed that as not being true or whatever else. And of course, I'd heard people like Eric John Phelps and stuff like that. And some of that stuff just kind of seemed like it wasn't correct to me. And then when I was researching the Council for National Policy, all of a sudden, all these connections to the Jesuit order started coming up, to the Knights of Malta. All these people in this group have these connections. And I started going, wait a second. Is this why there's sort of been a moratorium on talking about those groups within the truth movement? is because so many of the people in the so-called truth movement have connections to these groups. It does appear that way. So, again, it's just one of those things where you start to understand, okay, this is why, they say, oh, don't talk about the Anunnaki, or don't talk about UFOs, or don't talk about extraterrestrials, talk about the bankers and talk about the Rothschilds and blah, blah, blah. That was another thing that was a problem for me. It just seemed like, why? Why are you saying that these topics over here are okay and approved to talk about, but these topics over here are taboo? And again, my research has shown me that the reason that that is because some of these people are working either directly for or as agents of disinformation and gatekeeping for the establishment, for the custodians, for the people in charge themselves. And it's a very scary thing, but there is a lot of evidence pointing in that direction. So I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of that here today, Henry.
Absolutely. I want to talk more about your take on the Knights of Malta, the Jesuit order, some of the other organizations tied to this, the Catholic Christian, organization, religion as such as well later. If we briefly then look at the CNP, the Council for National Policy, what do you think it means that we have people like Stan Monteith, Pat Buchanan, as you mentioned, Chuck Missler, Paul Craig Roberts, Larry Pratt, Jerome Corsi, some of these people, that they are part of this group, and how do you think that their research is tied to the agenda of the group, and maybe do we know anything about the agenda of the CMP, considering that we don't hear that much about it, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious when you look at their policies, you look at some of the stuff that they're behind, that they're just as much a globalist organization as any other group you can bring up. But what I've found, it's taken me almost 4 years now to really realize this. Because as I mentioned at first, when I first got into finding out about the CMP, I think me, like everybody else, kind of sort of had this mentality of guilt by association, and that every single person that's a member of the group knows what's going on at every level. And I found that to be just absolutely not true. I think that, like, for instance, Jerome Corsi, I've talked to him in person before at different events and asked him about the Council for National Policy, and he openly talks about it, says, oh, yeah, I'm a member of that. Yeah, they were going to run me for president back in 2008, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he's totally willing to openly talk about it. Doesn't seem to even have an idea that there's anything wrong with the group or anything else, and he seemed very genuine about it. And then I hear people like, Phyllis Schlafly, another one of these members on the Alex Jones show. By the way, Phyllis Schlafly, if you look into her bloodline, this was admitted by genealogy websites online. She's a Merovingian blue blood on both sides of her family. She's from the Bruce bloodline and the Stewart bloodline. And those of you who've researched this stuff for a long time will know it's very, very rare that you have an offspring, a child like Phyllis Schlafly that would be born of a bloodline on both her mother and her father's side of the family. And I went to an event one time where she was speaking, and everyone rose and applauded and was just acting like she was the Queen of England there. And now, I find that out. So I think what we have here is we have some people in the group that are aware of all of the elements of the group. They are aware of what the agenda is. And these are the people that you see the most in alternative media and others trying to downplay the effect of the group, the reach of the group, what they're involved in. And then I think you have other people who are just well-meaning sort of, people who are legitimately trying to get out information. But ultimately what the group seems to be is it seems to try and be a catch-all for people that have certain issues, meaning you'll have one person in the group that seems to kind of focus on 9/11, or you may have one person in the group that seems to focus on UN stuff or abortion stuff. And it just seems that what they do is they bring all these people under one roof and then essentially give them their marching orders for how they are going to approach these issues in the public. So that combined with things like their 501c3 status that allows companies like the Coors family and others to donate large sums of money in the millions of dollars to this group. And because they have a 501c3 tax exemption, any millions of dollars that is donated to the Council for National Policy can then be written off by these companies on their taxes, and they get all that money back at the end of the year. So that's another thing that they're doing here. It's essentially like, okay, you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. And I think that there are levels. I think they're compartmentalized as much as any other group, and I think that there are people at the highest levels that know absolutely what's going on, and other people. I think you have to be very, very careful about making accusations against somebody who's been involved with a group, because there are indeed cases where there are people who don't really have any idea what the group is involved in at a much larger level.
Well, that's right. It's a good point. Often I found as well that situations are more complex than that. There is a tendency in the conspiracy movement to simplify in most cases. In some cases, that it is effective. It's the right thing to do in that sense. But it doesn't by default mean that these people are, guilty of a darker agenda. I guess what I question personally is the rationality of a person who actually goes into an organization without really knowing, I guess, furthermore, what the organization does or what their role in it. They just like to hang out with, other people of the same ilk, I reckon. I don't know what the mentality is there. But I'm not like that, so I can't understand that level of, awareness or such, Josh. But, often it is more complex. But you mentioned the bloodline connection. And that's interesting too. To you, does that mean, does that automatically make her, the person you mentioned, kind of guilty of being tied to the inner circle? Is it also applicable in that sense, Josh?
Well, I mean, I think that I don't know if it is necessarily. It just doesn't help. Let's say that. I mean, when you look at some of the ideas of, like, Phyllis Schlafly, for instance, she'll say that women need to stay home and stay in the kitchen and make babies and not go to college and be uneducated and just stay home and take care of their man or whatever. But yet she has like 3 or 4 degrees. She's not doing that. So that, that's one of those things where you say, okay, it's very hard to take you seriously when, you've got 3 or 4 degrees. You're not staying home pumping out babies. You're being out there in the world and being, your own woman, except you're telling women they shouldn't do that. So that combined with some of the issues that they talk about, as far as trying to, goad Americans into a new civil war and armed conflict. I mean, that's the biggest thing I have a problem with. But you also have these connections back to, connections with people in the group that go back to the Knights of Malta. You've got, even somebody like Stan Monteith, whose show Radio Liberty was started out as a sovereign military order of Malta, Nazi front. They didn't even change the name from Radio Liberty over at all when Monteith took it over. And you look into him, and he's a part of this bloodline as well. So, to me, it's more the fact that the group, is so secretive about their activities and their membership is why you have to question anybody that's in these bloodlines involved with the group. Because, if you guys are honestly not up to anything and there's nothing nefarious going on, I don't understand why we can't know who current members are. I don't understand why we can't know where these meetings are held. I mean, hell, we know where the Bilderberg group meetings are at. We always know who were in those things, but we still don't know where these CMP meetings are held. We don't know who's in them. And I think the big reason why is because if the media was actually allowed to see people, because oftentimes in the way you see it now, you have the right wing movement in the United States, but you also have, it's splintered. There's, a million different factions of it. You have these Tea Partiers over here, and then you have the Tea Party Express over here, and you have, you just have these different factions and groups within the group itself. And this is essentially how they deal out the marching orders of their individual operatives, who are all right-wingers, but, again, some who are on this issue over here. There's a great example of that in my film, The Secret Right Volume 1. A great example of that is we have a clip of Larry Pratt and former, what was he, John Ashcroft. And there's essentially, this ABC News clip in that film where they're kind of arguing over each other about some new Patriot Act law stuff, and John Ashcroft is saying it's good, oh, it's wonderful, and then the next thing you know, of all people, they show Larry Pratt from Gun Owners of America, who was involved in Iran-Contra, who was involved in white supremacist meetings with Howard Phillips, setting up the militia movement. He said that the United States needed a militia movement like the Contras. And then you hear this guy touted as some gun rights expert all over the Alex Jones show, and he's been connected to Pat Buchanan and the Center of Inter-American Security, where they were doing stuff for the Iran-Contra. So, it becomes very, very suspicious once you start seeing these groups that are involved in various high-level activity of the New World Order.
Absolutely. It's interesting to see how the Bilderberg Group now have their own official website. They release their members list online. And I'm not saying that isn't because of the work that people have done, in the alternative media circles, and obviously bringing this to the attention of the mainstream. We have people like, I think it's Charlie Skeleton or whatever from The Guardian writing regularly now about when the Bilderberg meeting occurs. And there is a lot of mainstream media, attention on it right now. So obviously they, would have transformed into another organization by now that meet under circumstances where they can be left alone. So that's kind of understandable. But what we're focusing on here, obviously, is all these other little micro-organizations that are out there and so forth as well. But to me, it seems like there's a lot of individuals out there that are participatory in, if you will, then infiltrating different groups and in some cases maybe even starting up movements or groups as well for the sake of, one point is to rally up people around an agenda or a common cause, if you will. And at the first level, that might be to kind of coax people out, if you will, those who are critical of certain issues. It's good for, the upper elite to kind of know who those people are, if you know what I mean, Josh, to kind of get those involved in the groups. And I want to try to kind of get to what you think is the ultimate, if there is such a thing, an ultimate agenda of that. When I look at a lot of the information out there in terms of the alternative media, I do see a lot of aggressiveness. It's about gunning up, if you will, in that sense, hunkering in the bunker. And I'm not against, owning guns or anything like that.
Or being prepared, no.
Of course, no, absolutely not. But I can also see the spreading of fear, this incredible ending up in survival mode. And, oh my God, shit is falling down all around you right now. But then in most cases, I'm not saying that it's not dire as well, but I'm just saying that this is a very black and white issue. There's no gray or middle ground here, where if I go out to the streets on a city here in Sweden, I can see that in certain aspects. Yep, I can see that there's a control grid coming in. I can see cameras here and there in different aspects, but the world is not falling around me as I walk there. Think there's still, little regions of freedom to work and operate within the system, and it's not as
life
dramatic.
Is still day to day. Yeah, life is still day to day. Yeah.
So, what do you see there in terms of that? Do you feel that it is a rallying up of people that are potentially on the cusp of being, let's say, critical of the government, let's say, and it's efficient for them, for the government, for the elites to actually try to coax these people out, try to understand who they are. So let's kind of focus on the negative things and let's get them try to react to this. What do you think, Josh?
I think that's an element of it. I think that I think they're definitely trying to. I mean, some stuff is allowed to come out. I think certain piece of information, many times I've said, okay, this is kind of suspicious. Why are we being allowed to see this? As if it's some sort of a honeypot, trying to bait us into this to see, how much we know or anything else, and to identify those people who, may get off of the plantation, so to speak, who may, actually, as you mentioned, delve off into other realms of information and may not just follow, what the mainstream of this are telling people. And I will get into that in just a minute as far as, what I think the deeper elements of this are, because there are deeper elements I've found within my research, I mean, to the deepest levels. But I want to go back and mention something because I sort of lost my train of thought there in the last, bit we were talking about. I mentioned that clip in the volume 1 about, Pat Buchanan and John Ashcroft. And so again, they're appearing to be on both sides, on two different sides of this issue. And then you find out, wait a minute, these guys are both members of the Council for National Policy, but yet on television and to the public, they appear to be divided on this issue. And I show, right after showing that ABC News clip, I show on the screen a letter from John Ashcroft to Larry Pratt, thanking him and praising him for his work, but yet in the media, these guys are being touted as being against each other.
That's right.
Here's Larry Pratt. And so that to me is it's kind of a microcosm for the whole thing, where you see, okay, these guys on television and in the media appear to be against each other, kind of like, the two, WWF wrestlers, these are, I'm going to kick your butt. No, I'm going to kick your butt.
Right.
But then behind closed doors, they're slapping five and they're having big drinks and they're good buddies. So that was another thing for me. I went, okay, I see what this is. This is kind of the way that they divide and conquer people, because one of the things that they referred to themselves as when the group first started, they referred to themselves as the right-wing version of the Council on Foreign Relations. And one of the things that as I started going back farther and farther into researching the group, I started noticing that the group actually had its origins, if you trace it back far enough, actually had its origins in the Fabian Society, the Fabian Socialist Society, that originated out of the London School of Economics in the early part of the 20th century.
So Josh, when you go far enough to the right on the left circle, then you end up on the extreme right, right? Or they meet up.
You find
back
out
there.
you find out that the international socialists, from the Royal Institute of International Affairs to the CFR to all these groups are actually ultimately in the end funded and created by the Fabian socialists who create the left groups and the right groups to assume total control. That's what the most important thing to me about the Council for National Policy is because upon their formation in 1981, what they assured that anyone who voted for either party in the left-right political spectrum in the end would get socialism. Look how many things were brought in, socialist things were brought in under Reagan, from Reaganomics to all this stuff, which led us to the economic thing that we are now. On and on and on. They've just become the kind of the, everybody sees the right wingers as it's just the stereotype that they're the warmongers.
That's right.
It's the stereotype that they're the Christian fanatics. And essentially what they do is they put out this idea in the media that, you want to be with anybody but those crazies. Anybody in their right mind wouldn't associate with, Jerry Falwell or, John Hagee or these crazy religious zealots. And so what that does is it drives people back over to where they want people to be, and that is back over towards the left wing into the socialism. So that was another big thing for me, Henrik. It seemed like that everybody was always trying to say that the whole New World Order conspiracy and everything was all left wing. It was like, all the left wingers are behind the New World Order, but the right wingers over here, they're free and clear and they're not involved in any of this stuff. And I said, well, that's just flat not true when you look at the research and you look at the things that these guys are connected with. And, everything from, like as I mentioned before, Iran-Contra, everything to that, to the impeachment of Bill Clinton. Bob Barr admits in his book, former, CIA agent and head of the NRA here in the United States, he admits in his book, the meaning of is that they cooked up and concocted the plan to impeach Bill Clinton at the Council for National Policy meeting in 1996. So, we have lots and lots of things, and I'm going to be detailing more of those in the new film, The Secret Volume 2. I'm going to be detailing some of the other stuff they've been involved in, from things like the Franklin cover-up with these different, to the foundation of the Temple of Set in the United States. Also to, we're going to show how Johnny Gosch and Jeff Gannon, are the same person. It's going to get into a lot of the deeper elements of this. And I think that's the most important thing that people need to know is that, whether or not so-and-so who's in the CNP is a good person or a bad person, is neither here nor there. What really is important is that any time that anyone is involved in groups that are working at the highest levels in secrecy, we should be allowed to ask questions about that.
Is this, then in that sense, this is the controlled opposition that you mentioned that it's being set up. So again, I'm back to that point that if there is a true voice of valid criticism out there, they won't never reach the top because that role will be fulfilled by one of these people who are controlled, if you will, Josh, already. That's
exactly how it is. That's exactly what it is. For instance, I always make the example, Henrik, of saying, okay, let's say that you wanted to start your own grassroots movement to find out the truth about 9/11. Let's just say you didn't have any idea there was already a 9/11 truth movement or any of this stuff out there. You just found out that 9/11 was a fraud and you wanted to start your own group to take. Well, what happens is you go, okay, I'm going to start a group and this is going to be my focus, and here it is. And then you get online or whatever and you start looking and you go, oh, wait a minute, there's already a group for this. There's already, this whole established thing for this for years and years. So what do? Do you start your own group? That focuses on what the issues are important to you, or are you more likely going to just go ahead and join the already existing group where people are already working on this, and go along from there? And I think that's what most people do. And I think that from my research anyway, that this is how it's been set up and designed to be that way so that, again, they can control the perimeters of the conversation. They can control what elements of the information are allowed to be in there and talked about and what elements are not.
And then on top of that, of course, Josh, you have the next level of that where potentially, again, then well-meaning good people that want to try to, expose this and that and the other end up potentially in a role of just infighting, if you will, where people out there put all their energy on trying to discredit the other group. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, then they, the top, crust elite, have still won at the end of the day because none of the energy and focus is actually being put on exposing and shining a light on them, but all this infighting underneath is going on. This petty little tyrants running around and try to, put each other down basically. So they win at the end. Crazy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that the stuff that I've seen, and I've been accused of that, and I've been called a divider, and I'm trying to divide people and everything else, and I've never tried to do that. I always wanted to try and bring people together and work with as many people as I possibly can. The problem is that the trauma-based mind control and the brainwashing of the intelligentsia of the truth movement is so heavy sometimes that it's very hard to do that. I got to tell you, the one person out of all in all my years of doing this that has never let me down and has never been anybody I've ever has always done what they said they were going to do has been Michael Desarian. I mean, he told me when I first started. I interviewed him for the first time in 2008, and I was just pretty fresh learning about the group, and I interviewed him and I told him I was making the volume 1 about the film, and he said, well, let me know when you're done with that film because I want to promote it, because to me it sounds like you found a lot of the same things I have, but just in a different way, and people need to know about that. And, I had a lot of people say that to me. A lot of people, oh, yeah, we want to help you promote the film and this, that, and the other. And I got to say, Michael Desarian was the only person out of anybody who promised me that actually lived up to what he said he would do. And he put the film on his website, promoted it. I just can't thank him enough for that. And so when you see that there are real people out there, and especially people at the level of Michael Desarian, who really actually do want to work with you and actually are involved in looking at the truth, it gives you a lot of hope and lets you understand that, look, as long as you're just focusing on the information, and the information is first, not this petty, ad hominem attack or personality attack stuff that people always want to resort to. As long as you're focusing on the information, then that's going to rise to the top. All the naysayers and the people who try to say things about you, all that stuff's going to go by the wayside. I've always asked people to just look, if you can contest this info about the Council for National Policy or any of this stuff that I put out, please bring that contrary information to the table. And, of course, so far, nobody else has done that yet, Henrik.
Well, I mean, exactly. You're right. I mean, there might be disagreements. There might be different things out there that people not on the level agree with, but that's not the point. If people are, not operating from that level of just being emotionally defensive all the time, and put that to the side and actually focus on the things that are important. And then again, you can work together on the issues that you do find, common ground on. And then, if there's something else that doesn't fall in, so what? I mean, that being different, that's a good thing. Again, otherwise we're back in the same idea again. This is a micro version of the New World Order. They're trying to homogenize everything, of making everything one. You know what I mean? So difference, diversity. I've seen those
tactics.
Good.
Yeah, I've seen those tactics used by people, Henrik. I've seen people, for instance, there was, even before I was even kind of aware of all the stuff about the Council for National Policy, the network I used to be on in 2008 when I started, we started getting calls from sponsors that we would try to get for the network, and they were saying that Alex Jones had said, "Oh yeah, don't sponsor these guys or whatever." And we started hearing all this stuff back, and I'm like, why would you try to intentionally sabotage somebody else's reach for the benefit of your own thing? That's that's sort of a big business tactic. That's not what this is supposed to be about.
That's right.
And in 2008, when I went to this meeting, it was here in Dallas. It was called the Freedom 21 conference, and it was sort of a right wing anti-Agenda 21 conference.
Yeah,
it had
that's right.
a lot of these these members of the Council for National Policy, like Phyllis Schlafly and Larry Pratt and Jerome Corsi and all these different people. And I was like, I'm going to go in this thing, and I'm going to go in there with my camera, and I'm going to get in their face, and I'm going to get in their comfortable little world, right. And I'm going to ask them to answer for this. And I got in there and I started to go, that's the wrong tactic.
Right.
I really had to grow a lot at that thing. I was like, that's what the what the truth movement or whatever everybody puts out, that, oh yeah, you go up there and you get in their face,
yell
and you get a
nice,
nice,
yeah. It's not going to help anything. It doesn't help anything.
It's not going to help anything. No. And I realized that. I said, what? I've spent my listeners that support my work and make donations and stuff. They paid for me to go to this thing, and I'm sitting here thinking, we had to spend all this hundreds of dollars to get into this hotel and stay at this hotel and get tickets to this event. If I go up and start yelling at these guys, I'm going to get maybe 20, 30 seconds of video. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be a funny laugh, for a day, and then everybody will forget about it. Or what I can do is go in here and actually approach these people like human beings and ask them if they'll talk to me. And, of course, they didn't. Larry Pratt from Gun Owners of America, this is absolutely true. I walked up to him And when he saw me walking up, he knew immediately who I was. My reputation preceded me. He turned ghost white. I mean, I think that he thought I was either about to hurt him or kill him or yell something out about him in front of his. He just turned ghost white when he saw me. And I just walked up and said, Mr. Pratt, I've tried getting you on my radio show before, and I've just had problems getting you on. And there's some issues I want to talk to you about. And before I could even finish what I was saying, he's like shaking and putting his card in my hand saying, call me, you know, and of course I did try to call him after that and could never get him on. But the point of the matter is that at the base level of this, you know, and I will say some, I don't know about all, but some of these people actually are human beings. And I think that we can get a lot farther, you know, if we try to say, hey, look, you know, this is the question I have. I want to know why you guys are in this secretive group. I want to know why you guys meet 3 times a year in secrecy, why you've got people at the highest levels of everything from business to government to low level groups to media, why there's no media allowed other than you know, WorldNet Daily is the only media they ever allow in there. So all these questions, and I find that, you know, again, some people are very apt to want to talk about it, and then others are, you know, I won't talk about it at all.
Well,
Dr. Michael.
Listen, Josh, I mean, if people, or if you in this case, I mean, have an opportunity to talk to these people, do a cohesive interview and actually try to get some coherent information out. I mean, that's the best way to do this. Is this not about understanding what they are about and trying to figure this out? I mean, otherwise, if we just, as you said, you just go up there and yell at them or some other stupid stuff, it's going to be fun for somebody on YouTube for a few days. But that will be that. We have not gone any wiser in terms of what actually is making these people tick, if you know what I mean. And furthermore, this is like we're back in the chessboard situation. Are you a black, you know, a player or a white player on the chessboard? Are you, you know, a pawn in the game, if you will, in that sense? Or can you actually transcend over that and try to understand from a broad overview what the chess game is about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been the whole thing about this for me is really seeing what, like, finding out about the Council for National Policy and going down the rabbit hole of this information has not shown me, how much I know or proven how much I know. Again, it's shown me how much I don't know, because I'm constantly having to shift and change what I believe, because there's new information coming in every day. So again, I think that what I think is most important is that we see in these groups like the Council for National Policy, microcosmically, it is a microcosm for the much larger power structure itself, meaning that at the very top, there are people who definitely have an idea of what the greater agenda is. They are definitely doing everything in their actions that they do on a daily basis to forward that agenda and to push it forward. But then on the flip side of that, there are people at the lowest levels who are involved in these groups who have no idea what is going on at the top. And I think those are the type of people that we need to try to get this information in the hands of, Henrik, because those people at the low level that don't know anything about what's going on at the top, if they see some of this information like I've put out in my films and on my radio show, it may encourage these people to say, you know what, that's not a group I need to be associating with. These guys are kind of up to no good here. And that to me, I think is one of the biggest and best things that we can shoot for, is hopefully trying to get some people that may want to become whistleblowers or say, hey, look, you know, I was a part of this and this is what's going on. And I think that you're never going to get that unless you create an environment first that says, hey, you know, we want you to do that. We're not your enemy. We're your friend. We just want the truth here. And I think that, as you stated, you know, there's too much aggression sometimes when it comes to this stuff, and we just don't need that negative energy. That's
right. Absolutely. We, you know, are beginning to round up here a little bit for the first hour. We want to carry on, talk more with you in the second here, but I guess I want to reiterate or go back to this point that you mentioned before about the Fabian socialists, again, before we do that. Is that where your research has led? Do you see that at the further back, if you will, in the back room, the dark agenda behind this leads back to the Fabian socialists? Is that what?
Well, at a certain smaller level, but it definitely goes back even farther than that. The biggest thing that I found that this goes back to is, again, you have many members of the Council for National Policy who are. This is what's interesting, because we're told that the Freemasons and the Jesuits are supposed to be against each other. We see the Jesuits taking this blood oath against Freemasons and all the rest of stuff. But inside the Council for National Policy, it's interesting. We have 33rd degree Freemasons like Rick DeVos, who's the founder of Amway. He also subsequently owns a basketball team in Orlando, Florida called The Magic. I thought that was funny. A 32nd degree Freemason owns a team called The Magic, So we have him and we have that. We have other Opus Dei members, in the Council for National Policy, Knights of Malta. So within the framework of this group, we have a lot of people from a lot of different secret societies. And, there's even guys that go back that have worked with the Federal Reserve. You have people like Richard Haas, who's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a member of the Council for National Policy. So some of these guys play both sides of the field. But for me, it goes directly back, and this is why you have so many religious zealots, people like, John Hagee and Pat Robertson, all these religious preachers being members of the Council for National Policy. They're where the real power lies in the CNP is their connections to what many people refer to as the priest class, the priestly classes, the Jesuit order, the Vatican, the Rome in general. That's really who we see as the controllers of the Council for National Policy and its constituents. And as I've found more and more recently, after reading William Bramley's book, The Gods of Eden, interviewing him, what I found more and more, Henrik, is that it goes back even farther than that. The origins of this group go back to the origins of the Illuminati, which is exactly why a lot of people in the truth movement have this sort of scripted idea of what the Illuminati is, that it's all wise top and everything. They never talk about the Los Alumbrados Society, which was actually St. Ignatius Loyola, who was the creator of the Jesuit order, was a member of
the Spanish Catholic branch of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's the one thing I'm finding more and more is that the importance of the CNP and the importance of this information is that these guys go back to the bloodlines, go back to the custodians, which go back to the Anunnaki. And this is why we're being told by the intelligentsia. This is what I believe. This is what we're being told by the intelligentsia of the patriot movement and the truth movement and whatnot, that these topics are taboo and we shouldn't look into those topics. We should focus on the bankers and the rest of this stuff. But I'm starting to figure out really why that is. And that is because these people are somehow affiliated either through blood or their actions or anything else to the power structure itself that goes back to these bloodlines that originated in ancient Sumeria.
That's right. And then you probably have some people within there as well that are working their best, if you will, trying to, gain credibility maybe in the mainstream media. And they have some idea that, oh, no, therefore we cannot absolutely not talk about this. And now you're discrediting the whole organization and everything that we've worked for. But again, I'm back to that situation. So what? Let's let the ships fall where they may, and let's follow this thing and see where the heck it leads up. What's the problem with that?
Obviously we have a problem and we've got to get to the bottom of it.
That's right. Okay, Josh, let's begin here to wrap things up here for the first hour. Let's talk a little bit about your website, obviously, theglobalreality.com. Mention your radio program, mention your films and how people can go about obviously looking, accessing more of your material, and if there's anything else you have out there that you want to promote or plug, if you will, Josh.
Thank you, Henrik. And again, my website is www.theglobalreality.com, and all my stuff is there. They can find my links to listen to the radio show live. They can find the archives. All my documentary films are up there as well. We have shipping banners and donate buttons there for people to support our work, because we don't have advertisements and we don't sell gold or water filters or anything out. We're just fully, whatever the audience feels they want to give us, that's how we survive. And people can also just go to YouTube and type in Josh Reeves and they'll find my name there and find a lot of videos and different clips that people have made. So thank you, Henrik. I really enjoyed this first hour. I'm looking forward to doing the listener hour next.
Absolutely. Theglobalreality.com. That's the website. Head on over there and check out a lot of the material that Josh has out there. And I think it will be a very, very valuable addition to your, if you will, little arsenal of varied information to try to get a grasp on what the heck is going on. And specifically then, if you've been into the alternative media already for a long time and you've been intrigued by a lot of the information out there. Again, the rabbit hole always goes a little bit deeper. So run with that, go with that, and just explore, investigate, and search. And the truth stands on its own. It doesn't need to be defended in that sense. And we'll see where all of this leads to. But stay with us, Josh, and we'll continue to talk more here in the next hour. We're talking with Josh Reeves from theglobalreality.com. We have been primarily talking about the CNP, the fake right-wing, controlled opposition and infiltration, if you will, of the alternative media. We're kind of on a trail here, and we're going to continue to follow it. And I want to continue to talk more about the Jesuits, the sovereign order of the Knights of Malta and the priest class that you mentioned before, Josh. We hear, as you mentioned before, that there's a struggle between Freemasonry and Jesuits or the Catholic world. That as a Catholic you can't join Freemasonry. The Knights of Columbus seems to be an exception in some regards. They are Catholic, but they both have a keen interest in Freemasonry. There's other examples like Cardinal Francis Spellman, Archbishop Edward Egan, and it's been even speculated that Tony Blair was actually a member of the Studholme Lodge in England, and he obviously converted to Catholicism after that. So this is not quite true. There seems to be a real gray area here, and where this really meets seems to be when you actually look into the world of the Knights Templar. Since they exist both in the Freemasonic world and the Catholic world as well. What do you make of this, Josh, in terms of the fact that if you go high up enough in the Freemasonic world or in the Catholic orders, if you will, they seem to kind of converge there. And we actually had a confirmation, if you will, of that with one of our guests that we had with us back in 2008, William F. Mann. He was a head of the Canadian Knights Templar. So what's going on there, Josh? What do you make of it?
Well, that's one of the things that I have found absolutely is that, all this stuff about these groups being separate or, one group not being involved with the other group is an absolute lie. And it's just something that's been put out there, into the eyes of the public so that we don't really see how much power the greater agenda has. For example, going back to the origins of the Council for National Policy, this is to me where you really see a great example of that, Henrik. And, the group was started, as I mentioned in the last hour, in 1981. It was started by the Reverend Tim LaHaye, who many people will recognize for his books, a series called The Left Behind, which talks about the rapture and all this stuff. And there's a great article that was printed some years ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, in Rolling Stone magazine called Reverend Doomsday. And people out there can Google that. You can type Reverend Doomsday, Tim LaHaye, Rolling Stone magazine into Google, and they can find that and read this for themselves. But it talks about in that interview how when Reverend Tim LaHaye started, he started with the John Birch Society in 1959, and in 1959, Henrik, Tim LaHaye was talking about things like the UN takeover. He was talking about things like the Illuminati. Many of the key tenets of the research community he was talking about in the late 50s in the John Birch Society, and then you fast forward to that being the same area that happened to launch the Reagan campaign years later. And in 1981, when he formed the Council for National Policy, Tim LaHaye, who has been through the years, very open in the media and in the public about the evils of Catholicism and how bad Catholics are and being against them, but yet he takes his startup money for the Council for National Policy from the Hunt family, that are based here in Dallas, Texas, who are all Knights of Malta and who are one of the biggest Catholic families, in the whole power structure. They breed horses with the Queen of England. And, so that was one of the initial things for me. I started going, okay, this doesn't make any sense at all. How is it that we have a person who's been vehemently anti-Catholic in the press taking his startup money from this group from Catholics? And then also he, as I point out in Secret Right Volume 1, he has a book called The Power of the Cross, that came out in 1999, Tim LaHaye. And on the cover of this book, you see the crown and the cross. Now, the crown and the cross is a Masonic symbol that goes back thousands of years. It goes back to, the York Rite of Freemasonry. And, here on the cover of this book, you see this Freemasonic symbol. And we also find out Tim LaHaye is also a 32nd degree Freemason. And so right there, you start to see these conflicts and this idea of how can there be Freemasons and Knights of Malta and the Jesuit order and all these guys existing in this one group. And as you mentioned with the Templars, that's really, to me, what I found. The Templars excavated Solomon's temple for all of these ancient magical secrets, and they allegedly found all these ancient manuscripts, the Goetia, all of these various magical texts that, for all intents and purposes, they were using to establish their dominance and power throughout Europe. They set up the first fractional reserve credit enslavement system.
That's right.
They were getting really ready to challenge all of Europe until, of course, as the story goes, the Vatican came along and basically, said they were heretics and basically put them on trial and killed them all. But what people forget about that is that what information didn't get taken up to Edinburgh, Scotland, where they fled to, was absorbed into the Vatican, into the Catholic order. And this is what they've done. They've gone along just absorbing religions throughout the world. They absorbed Judaism. They absorbed Christianity. They absorbed Islam. And that's really what the whole priest class thing is that relates to the Jesuit order and the Vatican. It's this idea that they have absorbed all the world's religions. They've absorbed all the information of the secret societies, and they've molded it into their own thing. I for years was struggling to find anything in Freemasonry that said, because you're always heard, Freemasonry is satanic, devil worship. It's all this. Right. It's all pure evil. And in my research, what I found is that it's not the information itself that is evil. It's the hands of the people it's whoever it's in the hands of that are using it. So the priest class created this environment to where anybody who's lived over the past 300-400 years will not know any different, that information, that knowledge only exists in the hands of people that have established themselves as working for the greater power structure. And so I think that that's why finding out about this information, looking into these deeper esoteric teachings, looking into this Masonic stuff, I think it's vitally important that all of us out there who call ourselves researchers are looking at that, because I think that could be the Achilles heel. That could be what could turn this whole thing around, is us figuring out how we use this information, this knowledge, not for the enslavement or for evil or to use it against humans, but to use it to our greater advantage. And this is talked about in ancient Sumerian texts by Ea or Enki. Enki was said to have set up the first secret society known as the Brotherhood of the Snake. And this is how he wanted to teach mankind in secret who we are, what we are, and where we come from. And that's what I believe to this day, the whole intelligentsia of the Truth Movement, the Patriot Movement, and the CMP that are connected to that priest class, I believe that's what their job is. Their job is to keep us from ever finding out these secrets of the secret society so that we can use them for good and not for evil. I think that's really what they're trying to cover up.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very obvious in that sense. We understand that they obviously have to keep this information secret for it to work for them alone. If people get savvy to this and understand how some of these tricks happen in terms of both those of an occult nature, but also those that are on a kind of a unconscious level and how they operate certain things. And that's why I think so many of these people also so vehemently, these so-called, Christian, in most cases, they also claim that they represent some kind of Protestantism. And I don't know if that's true. I mean, obviously, if this leads back to Catholicism, it could be argued that these actually, again, we're back to the control opposition situation. But in that regard, what I'm getting to is that from a lot of these people that we mentioned before from CMP, we hear that all of this stuff about, astrology or looking into esoteric, matters, that's all of the occult, evil wickedness that we should leave alone. And by golly, don't go there, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, that was my whole thing, is I set out to try and disprove that. I found that, what's interesting about how the Knights of Malta, took hold of the United States, and this ties into the CMP as well, is that, they, after World War II, you started to see they needed a new enemy, and Protestantism had sort of been the enemy of, the priest class up to that point. And, according to researchers like William Bramley in his book, The Gods of Eden, it talks about Protestantism being set up as another one of these maverick religions, one of these religions that was set up, as you mentioned, to be against the power structure at first, but then was again corrupted and turned into just another control mechanism.
I think sorry to cut you off, Josh, but I personally, from what I've been reading and studying currently, what I have, the feeling of the sense that I have is that it was set up from the beginning to be the controlled opposition, if you know what I mean. It's like a really scaled down version. Catholicism in that sense represents, at least, if you will, then a religion that carries something with it from the ancient world. And we hear these stories, obviously, when Luther went to Rome to see some of the statues they had there, all the saints that they have. He understood clearly and rightly so that this is based on old, pagan worship from their point of view. And again, that doesn't mean evil or anything like that. But in that regard, he saw that was the case. He understood that, and therefore set up this alternative religion, if you will, then, or started to protest, obviously, against this. But it's a very even more so slimmed down version. For what I'm beginning to see is that this was the agenda, if you will, all along. It's just that for Catholicism to work is they have to bring something in from the ancient world. So they have kind of like that as a stepping stone. The next step is to even take away those things, if you will, from the ancient world. And if we look at it, there's very few, expressions, if you will, in a Protestant church as compared to a Catholic church. And nothing of this means that I favor one or the other. I'm just trying to figure out the mechanism that they've been using in order to kind of scale down all the time, Josh. But go ahead before,
to me, I think it's the same thing, Henrik, as stuff like the Rothschilds funding every side of every war since the first American Civil War. Regardless of who wins or loses, they come out the winners because they're funding both sides. I think that's the same exact thing that you're talking about here, is meaning that if you're going to create a holy war, you're going to create and it does seem that since time immemorial, going back to the very first societies, that the elite or the priest class or whoever it may be, the power structure itself has done everything in their power to try and pit us, the individual citizens, against each other. And I think you're exactly right. That's what the creation of Protestantism or any of these other religions, you have to have an A team and a B team. You have to have a good guy, an alleged good guy, an alleged bad guy.
Yes.
And then what ends up happening? Who ends up fighting those wars and dying for those ideologies? Us, the people. And so, a very interesting example of that, tying back into the CMP stuff for me, was when, and I covered this in the Secret Right Volume 1, was how, you had the whole thing where Alex Jones allegedly snuck into the Bohemian Grove and all this stuff, and all this information that was coming out. And I wanted to know why there were two big things that were left out. Number one, the owl. We're told that the owl is some representation of Moloch or something like that, which is completely untrue.
Yeah.
It's completely untrue. Actually, what the owl represents Minerva, the Roman god.
That's the true, Illuminati symbol, if you want to be adamant about it. They used the owl all the time as a representation of wisdom, one who can see in the dark. But go ahead, Josh.
Yes, no, that's exactly right. And so that, to me, that was one glaring example. And then, if one wasn't enough, then there's a number two. And I was saying, okay, well, how come this is never mentioned? Inside the Bohemian Grove, there is a statue of Saint John of Nepomuk. Now, if you look up who Saint John of Nepomuk was, he was a Jesuit martyr who was martyred because he would not give up. He was killed because he would not give up the secrets of the Jesuits and of the priest class order. And inside, I think he may even be ushering like a finger over his mouth, saying, "Shh, keep quiet." But that's what that represents.
He's a Hiram Abiff, if you will, from the representation. Same way he's that an idol that keeping the secret safe, so to speak.
Yes, he's an incarnation of Hiram Abiff. Exactly. That's inside of the Bohemian Grove. That was left out in Jones' film about that. Those two connections right there with Minerva and Saint John of Nepomuk being inside Bohemian Grove, to me, tell the much larger story and tell us why exactly it is that they are there in that grove doing those rituals and what it really goes back to. And to me, if you don't have that information that's left out of the greater picture, it's going to be a lot harder for you to draw your conclusions on what you believe this stuff really is and what these guys are really into. Absolutely,
because again, we always and constantly hear that these people are not Christians, and again, I wouldn't argue that that's not true in the sense that we in terms of how certain doctrines within Christianity are, practiced, if you will. But at the same time, there's an esoteric version of Christianity too. There's a lot of, difference, as you mentioned, different secrets within these orders and so forth as well, that we, out on the surface, the people know nothing about, and they never have, ever since the time that the church moved into many other countries as well. So they've always, as you said, had this little elite inner circle, a club, a priest class, if you will, and they use any means necessary. To them, I don't think that anything of this is considered to be evil. These are just tools to further enslave the rest of the human race, actually.
That's exactly what it is, and that's the only way they see it. These guys are not sitting around twiddling their thumbs, like, "Oh, I'm so evil," ha ha ha. It's not that way for them. It's just that it's been going on for so long, and a lot of these traditions and practices and rites and ideologies are being passed down generationally, and in many cases, a lot of this stuff is being passed down hereditarily through the bloodlines, and now we start to see why that is. That's been one of the more fascinating things for me is going back and seeing just how these different groups, specifically in the right wing, all tend to have these connections back to the bloodlines and what have you, and it's all there. But I cannot believe it's just for me, from starting my show in 2007 till now, the amount of information, Henrik, that's out there that, I didn't know about when I first started, on air, and I thought I knew, pretty much everything at the time. It's just amazing how much information there is out there and how much more there is to know. And, again, what bothers me the most is that there just seems to be some, dogmatic approach to not, trying to get certain people to not look into certain types of information. I just think that's dangerous.
Absolutely. We hear, quite a bit as well about the connections between Knights in Malta and Blackwater and things like this. Very, very interesting connections connected through, is his name Eric Schmidt? He was the former, was he the head of the Pentagon? And then he moved on to actually work for Blackwater, and he's a member of Knights of Malta. And it's quite interesting when you begin to look into some of these connections, Josh.
Yeah, Eric Prince as well. Eric Prince, the head of Blackwater, his father and mother, Edgar and Elza Prince, were on the board of directors at the inception of the Council for National Policy. And, it just so happens they're both Knights of Malta as well. And, his mother was a Dame of Malta. And, much like Phyllis Schlafly, she's also a Dame of Malta. And, we started to see these connections with the father and mother of Eric Prince of Blackwater in the CMP, and then fast forwarding to seeing things like, the Blackwater calling some of their tanks and their Humvees. They had one that was called the Templar 1, the Templar 2. They had a tank that was called the Crusader. You start to see these things and you start to understand, okay, well, we see they're connected to these groups like the CMP. We see they're connected to the Knights of Malta and the Priest class, but what is what is their agenda? Why are they committing all of this genocide and bloodshed against Arab populations in the Middle East? And what I believe is that it's a systematic eradication of people who are bloodline descendants of either the Anunnaki or the Nephilim or whoever it was. And these people have some sort of claim to power over the lands of the Middle East where all the oil is. And if you systematically eradicate those people and use depleted uranium and everything else, which affects coming generations, then you can effectively knock that out and keep anybody from ever having a challenge to your power structure. I think that's why they invaded the Iraq National Museum in 2003. At the beginning of the invasion, they took all of the ancient Sumerian seals and the little small reptilian clay statues. Those things disappeared. They found a room full of these. There's footage of this, Henrik, where they actually show, it was on the BBC, where they show our special forces actually breaking open the vault. And when they go inside of the vault, inside of this gigantic vault, there are genie bottles or gin bottles as far as the eye can see. And if you look into that and understand that, those are said to be spirits. And so my question is if they went in there and broke and took all those antiquities, where did all these genie bottles that allegedly had these spirits in them? And, I'm wondering if these guys have unleashed them, if that's what their plan was. But it just continues to be more and more information that we see that for some reason, whatever is in these ancient texts going back to the ancient civilizations of, the Ubaid period of Sumeria, which was pre-Sumeria there in Mesopotamia, then, of course, Sumeria, Babylon, Assyria, we start to see all these correlations to direct connection with the quote-unquote gods or the extraterrestrials and access to this information. I think that's why they've been snapping up these antiquities over the past several years, is because, if 50 years ago, Henrik, if we read an ancient text or an ancient Sumerian text 50 or 60 years ago and it was referencing genetic manipulation and all this advanced technology, we would think it was hogwash and we wouldn't have any reference point for that. But now that our own technology has progressed and people are going back and looking at these ancient manuscripts, people now have a context for what they're talking about more than any other time in human history, because now our technology has reached this certain level where now we can go, oh my goodness, they're talking about genetic manipulation here. They're talking about, cutting the top off of a mountain with a laser beam, much as we have seen that happen in Peru near the Nazca lines. That's talked about in the Lost Book of Enki. So we start to, I think that's been why there's been such a power grab and an importance on these antiquities placed on them by the elite, is that now mankind has the ability to reference these texts and know what they're talking about. And I think that's become a serious problem for the elite.
The U.S. are paying for the rebuilding, obviously, of Babylon. They have no intention of leaving whatsoever. America is being bankrupt, leading the role, of wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and obviously now we see it, going into Libya as well. We see it in Egypt. There's, speculation that this might be obviously it is in many other countries as well that I left unmentioned here, but Yemen, Bahrain, possibly Syria, etc., etc.
Yes.
What is going on there, do you think? What is it? Is it just the reemergence of a new crusade, or again, is it a rebuilding of something? What the heck is happening here, do you think?
I think it's kind of all of those things, Henrik. I think from what I found, it definitely, the whole thing of them rebuilding, because if you read those ancient texts, the Bible and all these different texts, they talk about how, for the fulfillment of the prophecy that, Babylon not only had to be built, but Babylon had to be destroyed. And Babylon was never technically destroyed. And so what I believe is that they're trying to rebuild it so they can later destroy it and tear it down to fulfill their prophecy. And you mentioned Yemen, and we've seen a lot of information coming out of there that may indicate that, there are things like the Ark of the Covenant there. You've had Gary Vay,
the Temple of the Queen of Sheba, very interesting.
Sheba. You've had Gary Vay on the program talking about that, here on Red Ice. And, it's very interesting stuff because the tribal people of Yemen have been trained generationally for thousands of years to protect that palace and protect what is there. But then we're told in the United States media and in the media throughout the world that there's 8-year-old children in Yemen who have Smurf stickers on AK-47s and they're trained, but we're never given the context as to why that is. It's not that they're just crazy militant Al-Qaeda children running around with AK-47s. They've been trained generationally to protect and keep what is there. And I think that's exactly what it is. I think that they have now, through using earth-penetrating tomography, using things like HARP to be able to look deep under the ground to locate resources. I think they've also been able to now locate areas where ancient antiquities are located. And it just so happens that these happen to be in areas throughout the world where major biblical events happen, major religious events happen, spiritual events happen. And I think that they're in a mad dash to acquire the Ark of the Covenant, the Tablets of Destiny, all these different things.
Yep.
Because I think that we're reaching a time where I think it's a timeline. I think that I don't have all this put together yet, Henrik, so I don't really know for sure. But what I believe is, and I think that there's some sort of a timeline for them to acquire these ancient artifacts and technology. And if they don't, before a certain time period, these things are going to reveal themselves to everyone on the planet, and then it's going to be they're going to be unable to basically use that stuff to control us anymore because, again, the genie will be out of the bottle at that point and all will be revealed. So I think that's why there's been such a mad rush to claim all these countries and different places where artifacts are. It just happens to be the current hotspot of Al-Qaeda. Every time they locate some new antiquities, we're pretty much told not too long after that just happens to be where Al-Qaeda is. So you're starting to see these patterns. I think that pretty much explains it.
Absolutely. And how do you think it is that they can keep an agenda like this going again? I always like to come back to this question again. If it's human beings within these groups and doing this, do you think that they are just there for the sake of the money, for the fact of being in the circle of power for a little while, and this is enough for them? But if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, we're talking about an agenda that is unfolding throughout thousands of years, and many of these people will never see the whole true fulfillment, if you will, of the plan. So why do they keep supporting this, do you think? And as a top to that, or furtherance to that question, is it possible, do you think, that we have other types of beings with us in this case that actually are capable of living longer in one way or another, meaning that they are actually seeing the fulfillment of the agenda over the long period, the timeline, if you will, Josh?
I think it's very possible. I mean, we've had reports of, the Count of Saint Germain appearing in, Mount Shasta in California, years after he was dead, talking about, underground bases and talking about, being immortals. I think that's definitely very real. But I think the reason why, as you mentioned, your question about why do these continue to push this forward and whatnot, I think for a lot of people, most of the ones that are in this at the highest levels, that's where, again, the whole bloodline thing ties in. What they're told, I think, at a very young age, when they start bringing them up the ranks through high school and into college, and then, as you mentioned, groups like the Skull and Bones at Yale and other groups like that. I think what it is that they're instilling in these people at a very early age this whole idea of family pride. It sounds silly, but I think that's how they get most of these people into doing this. Is they essentially say, look, you come from a family that has been in the power structure for thousands of years. I mean, for instance, the Bushes, you can trace the Bushes all the way back to Ramses II if you go far enough in the genealogical records. And I think that for a lot of these people, that's what it is. They're told, look, you are very powerful. You come from a very important, powerful family. You are one of these bloodlines. Everything you do is important. So I think that when they operate under that's what allows them to not really see the evil and the bad of what they're doing, because they believe that they are living up to their birthright by furthering this agenda and by continuing and passing it down to their children and their children after them. That's how they get a lot of these people. And I think some of them, as you mentioned, some of them are very aware of the power structure and aware of the larger agenda, but many are not. And, as far as the whole thing with, different intelligences and communicating with these spirits and different entities and even reptilians and stuff like that, I can tell you all those things. When I first started researching this stuff, Henrik, I was, totally, there's no way any of that stuff. But, I've experienced things and I've seen things where, for instance, this is a great example. We talked about the CMP. One of their members is a guy by the name of Tom DeLay, former House Majority Leader here in the United States, involved in many scandals. He was involved in the stuff with Jack Abramoff and all the lobbying going on in the United States government. Well, I had an opportunity to approach Mr. DeLay back in 2007, and he was coming to do a book signing in Dallas, and my sister and I had went down to maybe confront the guy or whatever. But we kind of when it happened, we're kind of like, let's not kind of jump in his face. But I had on a T-shirt that said, what happened to World Trade Center Building 7? And my sister had on a T-shirt that said controlled demolition. And Tom DeLay walked up in the parking lot and he said, how are you guys doing? He looks down at her shirt, looks at my shirt, turns blood red, and then he looks at us and his eyes rolled over black, and he just looked at us and appeared to scan us up and down. Now, I had heard stuff about the reptilian stuff from people like David Icke and others, and I always thought it was just a bunch of hogwash, nothing to it. And then I heard this story, David Icke tell this story about being backstage at a BBC interview and the former Prime Minister of England being there. Yeah, Tom Heath doing that to him. And I went, oh my goodness. Right. Maybe there was something to this, because there was no doubt, Henry, it was like he looked through us. I felt like I felt like I was looking at an entity from somewhere else. Like I wasn't looking at a man. And I tell you, it's one thing to see this stuff and go, it may be real or maybe not real, but man, it's totally different when you experience it for yourself and you go, oh my goodness, there's something dark and evil there. So, my research has taken me into looking into things like, the ancient text of the Goetia, which is a magical text for summoning demons and controlling them, and angels as well, that goes back to, the time of King Solomon. I look at stuff like John Dee channeling these entities, channeling these macrobes and different things. And then you of course, you coincide that with our modern day people who are involved in the Council for National Policy and the right wing, and they're involved at the highest levels of the priest class and religion. And you start to see, these guys are the modern day versions of this. They're taking their marching orders from these off-earth entities, these fourth dimensional entities, just as much as people in the past were. But the thing is, we just don't see or can comprehend that that's happening. It's very easy for people to believe that, okay, the Knights Templar were channeling Baphomets and channeling, entities through decapitated heads, and people see that and they go, oh, you know what? They probably were doing that. But then you tell them that, Tom DeLay or somebody like that is doing that, or some of the modern day, and they just don't want to see it. But this stuff has just been passed down continually. And I think that's another element of the whole, communicating with off-earth entities, taking their marching orders from that. As I've gone up I kept going up the power structure, Henrik. I kept researching and going up and up and up. And, I found the Bilderberg group. I found the Rothschilds, and it just seemed like there was more there to me. And then, I came across, I think it was Michael Desarian who pointed out to me that, in the Encyclopedia Judaica, they make reference to the Rothschilds being the guardians of the Vatican's treasury. Yep. And that was a huge thing for me. I went, oh my goodness. You see, now I get what's going on here, is that you go up and up and up, and you think you found the tip top of the pyramid. The groups get smaller. You go from the CFR to the CMP to the, Order of the Garter to the Council of 13, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And then you kind of hit a brick wall. You say, well, wait a second here. Now, I can't find any more groups on the earthly plane, so to speak. I can't find any more groups higher than the bankers or the Jesuits or the priest class or whatever else. But there still seems to be another layer of control there that's intangible that we can't touch and we can't see and we can't define and put our hands on. And I think that's where this whole idea of the elite and of the people at the upper echelons channeling entities for information and getting information that they can use for their benefit and for their power, I think that's where that whole thing comes in at. So, it's one of those things where, again, people just have to look into any of this stuff for themselves and judge for themselves. And all I can do and all you can do, Henrik, is kind of relate how we see this stuff from our research. But, it's definitely there.
Absolutely. There seems to be a lot of families that are kind of the stewards or the keepers of the finances, if you will. We have a version of that here in Sweden, the Wallenberg family, very, very wealthy family. And same thing there. It seems to be, it's not that they're not living, obviously, extravagant lifestyles and all that, but there seems to be something else going on there as well. It seems like they're just building the wealth like for something or for somebody. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is the way to do it. Obviously, these are usually families that are not in the limelight. So from a person who's coming into this for the first time, they think they might have discovered the ultimate secret once they stumble over, the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds, if you will. But the fact is that there is more to it behind the scenes than that. So obviously they might just be in that position where they're keeping the control of the finances for somebody else. There's another thing I want to wing by you as well. A vital, obviously, component of the inner circle of the elite seems to be the importance, if you will, of joining any kind of secret society. Ritual and initiation into a certain secret society seems to be important. And I've kind of speculated that what if this is a form of mind control, or maybe even more advanced? It could be worse if you look at it from that point of view. It could be some kind of invitation to some of these entities that you mentioned, Josh, to kind of come in and take over the body. I've heard accounts from people who, like, they don't really truly understand the rituals that they go through, but yet they do it, and they pledge allegiance to an organization before they even truly understand what actually the allegiance is and what actually the role in this is. And that's just incredible to me. What do you make of that, Josh?
I think you're absolutely 100% correct. As far as I'm concerned, from what I found in my research, I started noticing that I have this. I ordered this off eBay. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I found a copy of. It was a second edition copy of Albert Pike's book Morals and Dogma, which of course is the great Scottish Rite Freemasonry book that they used to take them through all the degrees past the third degree. And I started noticing, as because I just picked the thing up and started reading it, even though that's not technically what you're supposed to do. And I had a friend who actually started reading some of this stuff on his radio show. And as he was reading this stuff on his radio show, his monitor started flickering, going out. He felt like he was being psychically attacked. All kinds of weird stuff started happening. And that's when I was reading those, texts out of Morals and Dogma, it dawned on me that the phrasing of the words, the way that they are written, it's like you read it and you go, wait a minute, grammatically, a lot of this stuff doesn't really make a lot of sense. That's because you realize that each word and each phrase and each sentence in Morals and Dogma has a mathematical and a sacred mathematical programming to it, an alchemical programming, to where it is having an effect. Reading it is having an effect on your subconscious mind. It may not be affecting your conscious mind, but think of your subconscious as a shutter on a camera. And what happens, Henrik, on a shutter on a camera? The more that you open it, slowly open it, what happens? More light comes in, right? It becomes clearer. And I believe that that's how your subconscious works in these secret societies. You go through the rituals, you go through reading this stuff, and slowly, your subconscious is opened up. And gradually, the more that your subconscious is opened up, the more it's wide open eventually for total control, total mind control, total programming, and total takeover. And I think that you're exactly right. That is what these secret societies are designed to do. They are designed to open your subconscious up without you knowing it so much that you are open to control from people, from entities, from possibly extraterrestrials, pretty much anything which could have the ability to manipulate your consciousness in a way that is beyond your control. So, yes, I think that's the double-edged sword of this secret information, as I mentioned earlier, is that, in the hands of the people that it's in the hands of right now, and the hands of the people it's been in for thousands of years, all we can see and all we have a reference point for is the evil connotations from it. We have never been allowed to exist in a world of possibilities where this stuff could be used for a positive effect. So of course, everybody's going to say all of this stuff is evil and all of it is for evil purposes because that's all we've ever known. So I think you're exactly right. I think that is definitely beyond, way before MK Ultra, way before any government mind control operations.
Yeah, that's right.
The original mind control operation was the secret society and using that to manipulate consciousness.
The words that people speak, obviously implying we spell the words. It is a spell. This emanates a frequency, and then you have the intention of this. You have creation of languages, the Elizabethan that John Dee and Edward Kelly were behind of, creating. There's a lot of interesting clues here. And I remember a few articles we've had up on redicecreations.com about how words also, and frequencies actually program your DNA. It's a kind of a programming. These might be, texts or, initiatory rituals that have been left behind by someone or something else. And what if, just let's throw out a what if here, Josh. What if this is just if you will, then a mind control program, an advanced but ancient mind control program that kind of just have run amok, if you will, within the human society. I'm not saying that it's not totally uncontrolled by anybody up at the ladder, but what if the program as such, as a meme, as a kind of a mind virus, have just taken over, and these people actually have no idea in that sense what they actually are doing or implementing? It's kind of a scary thought, don't you think?
Well, no, I mean, it is a scary thought, but I think it's one that's very valid, Henry, because I think the idea of the Trojan horse, in any of this stuff needs to be taken into account. How do we know that, the guys who became the priests, that's what oftentimes people forget. We talk about the priest class or whatever. People forget that, in the days of the original civilizations going back to ancient Sumeria, there wasn't congressmen and senators and lords and presidents. It was the priests. The priests were the ones who were in power. They were the ones who allegedly had the direct connection with these entities, with these gods, and then they brought back the information and gave that out to the people. I mean, how do we, as you mentioned, how do we know that everything from the very beginning of communication with these entities, from, as you said, our language, how we write things out, spellings, they are spells. I mean, we don't know. It just does seem that you're exactly right. Our language is designed to basically keep us in a state of arrested development. That's one of the things, going back to, as I was talking about reading Morals and Dogma, when you read the pages of that book, Henrik, you are unable, no matter how much command you have of your particular language, you are unable to read that book and then go to someone and say, okay, this is what it's about. This is what Morals and Dogma is about. You are unable in our current language to relate what is in those texts to someone else. I think it's by design like that. Yeah, I think absolutely that all of this stuff from the very beginning has been designed to keep us in a state of arrested development. And the bottom line is that frequencies affect, you can manipulate someone's consciousness. You can manipulate someone's growth, their DNA structure, whether or not they're going to reach 12-strand DNA activation, any of this stuff, by the use and manipulation of frequencies, whether it's frequencies of sound, of the spoken word, of music, or any of this stuff. The key that I think that people are going to start to understand over the next several years is that frequencies and the manipulation of those frequencies has been one of the, if not the biggest weapon that has been unleashed on mankind for thousands of years.
That's right. And there's another point to this as well. It seems like some of these people within the circles, the elites, or entities, whatever we want to call them, are in a possessed mode. If we talk about greed, for instance, it doesn't at all explain it all the way. These are people that want more and more and more to a level where it's totally absurd. It's beyond money, and there's something else, like a religious, theological drive that is behind some of these people, it seems like. And obviously, again, we're back to that question, for what? What is the purpose? We've been talking about the invasion of certain countries to potentially get a hold of certain artifacts that are going to contribute in whatever the plan is. How far do you personally think that this extends, Josh? Are we talking about, is this even the reason why they are expanding into space exploration, trying to find and discover maybe clues within our solar system of both our ancient past, but maybe also, again, going back to the Nephilim, the Watchers, the Anunnaki, what have you. What do you think of that, Josh?
I think that that's absolutely the case. I mean, I've been researching this stuff half my life, Henrik, and the conclusion I've come to personally for me, and again, I want to make that crystal clear, not expecting that to be the conclusion for everybody else out there, but my conclusion for me that I've found is that that's why there's been so much importance placed on these bloodlines. That's why there's been so much importance placed on keeping their bloodlines pure and keeping those people in positions of power, is because I believe that the elite, their ultimate goal and plan is to be able to emulate and replicate what these quote unquote gods, the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, whatever you want to call them, to replicate the technology they had and master it so that they can then become gods on an equal par with those that came to earth and mated with the daughters of man and set up society and all the rest of it. I think that their ultimate goal is to be able to stand side by side with those people, and in much of the same way as they probably did, take that and take their bloodlines and spread those to other planets and other galaxies throughout the universe. I think that ultimately is their plan. I think that's why they're spending trillions of dollars on things like CERN, trying to open up wormholes where they can just transport themselves from one area to another. I think that's why there's been all this importance on supercomputers. These, I think it was the Ames Research Center for NASA here in the United States have had multiple people dying of massive cancers on one level of this NASA Ames Research Center, where they just happened to coincidentally be working on these hyperdrive systems for interstellar travel. Everything to me seems to be going towards the achievement of technology and the harnessing of technology so that the bloodlines in power can become actual living gods and then spread that to other places. I believe that is the case.
The question here is if we can tie in the potential fake, ET or alien invasion agenda as well. This might be, and this obviously is one of those situations where we, from our position, would never actually be able to know if we are, what are we looking at here? Would this be advanced human technology, the black ops, things that we never hear about that actually would come to Earth, looking like this is ET? We might be talking about genetically engineered beings or even human beings to pose as the aliens. We don't know shit about this. Let's face it. We have no idea. We're totally in the dark if this would to happen, Josh.
I mean, that I see that going on right now, Henrik. I mean, they're creating cognitive dissonance all over the place, where, you as well as I, every day we're looking at this stuff, and every day you see a video where a UFO video on YouTube or something gets posted or some UFO sighting happens, and you'll see stuff sometimes where you'll go, oh, that's obviously a fake. Obviously that's clearly a fake. And then you see other stuff where you go, well, I like these most recent videos that were shown of stuff around, I think around, Britain and around London and stuff like that. Some of this stuff you look at and you go, is that real? Is that fake? And I think that's the whole plan, is if they want to create so much cognitive dissonance with this stuff that people don't know for sure or for certain if what they're looking at is real or fake. And so they're able to manipulate that. One of the reasons that, I was very, on top of this whole false flag alien thing for the longest time. And I've sort of been thinking that, lately that may be a much larger part of this operation. And I'll tell you why. The, famous quote from Dr. Wernher von Braun, ex-head of the Nazi space program, brought over to the United States after World War II during Project Paperclip. There's this common, quote from Carol Rosen, his secretary. Right. And people in the research community often quote it and talks about, first the threat would be, communism, then it would be terrorism, and then it would be, asteroids. And when that didn't work, it would be aliens, and they were going to stage this alien invasion. And actually, if you listen to what Carol Rosen said, and you listen to these interviews and really hear what she says von Braun said, it's very different than that. He didn't say that they were going to stage an alien invasion and make us all believe aliens were invading us so we would put these space-based weapons up there to destroy them. He actually said that what they were going to do was they were going to tell us that these extraterrestrials that were here to help us were hostile when they were indeed not hostile, so that we would then build space-based weapons to destroy them, thus destroying any chance that they would come down and help humanity. And I started going, wait a second, that's been misquoted so many times on radio shows and movies and everything else that I can't think that it's just been a coincidence. Everyone's been mispronouncing that. So, it wasn't that von Braun actually said they're going to stage an alien invasion. He said that they were going to tell us that real aliens were actually hostile when they were not, so we would weaponize space against them and destroy them. So that's a very interesting thing to me. Yeah, again, we just don't know. And I think that the one thing that people can arm themselves with to know whether or not, what they see in the sky is real or isn't in the event that there's an alien invasion is this type of information. Because I think that there are going to be a lot of things that we're going to see glaring omissions. They're going to screw up and they're going to mess up things. And I think that's going to be just like 9/11 or any other issue. Those of us who've been paying attention to this for a long time are going to be able to come in and say, aha, you see, they messed up there. Or on the flip side of that, Henry, it could be that, whatever happens is so right on and spot on that none of us can argue with it. I don't know. But again, it's just very important that we all maintain the idea that anything that they tell us is real on that television is going to be an illusion.
Yeah, that's right. There's been a lot of strange things unfolding, obviously, in one way or another during the last few years, really, in that sense. We have strangeness in the skies over Russia. There was recently a portal of sorts spotted by an observatory in Hawaii. We have the Norway spiral, of course, and all these have been, explained away in different things, and it might be so. I'm putting all of these things together and realizing that something is kind of a little bit off here. We have huge sinkholes around the planet, strange weather, increased earthquakes. We have asteroids zooming by, totally missed by NASA. Now we hear stuff about Elenin. It's kind of it's a tricky time we're in right now, Josh. There's a lot of things going on, and it seems like a lot of things are being thrown at us from different angles, and everybody's kind of struggling to figure out what is going on here. How do you relate yourself to all this kind of information, Josh?
Well, I've always thought, like, for instance, this is what throws people off about when they listen to my show or they listen to my work. It throws people off because, I talk about the Anunnaki stuff and I talk about the ancient Sumerian texts and I talk about all the ancient alien stuff. But then where they lose me and where I don't jump on board with is I don't jump on board with the whole Nibiru thing. I just feel that the whole thing about Nibiru has kind of been a honeypot from the very beginning. It's been a red herring getting us to focus in on and focus in on this Nibiru thing and think that it's real, while ignoring something that actually is there. And what I mean by that is there's this alleged planet called Vulcan. And when you look at these ancient Sumerian depictions of the solar system, they show our solar system and all the planets in their right order, except there's an additional 2 planets there. Now, people always mention that there's an additional 1 planet, which is, of course, Nibiru. But they never mentioned that there's this additional other planet. So when I started looking into that, I found out that it's this thing called Vulcan, that's allegedly on the other side of Venus, on the other side of the sun, which we can't see. And when it comes close to the Earth, we have things like financial collapses, we have earthquakes, we have hurricanes, we have tsunamis. But because its appearance and its effects on the Earth don't coincide with the Mayan calendar and don't coincide with 2012, their effects are said to happen 2013, 14, 15, 16, people have kind of strayed against that. So I looked into the Vulcan thing and there's not a lot about it. But last year I was very, very taken aback by the fact that Japan sent a spacecraft to monitor Venus. And then after it was going to get done monitoring Venus, it was going to go on the other side of the sun. I'm sitting here going, wait a minute. This thing's going to go exactly where Vulcan is said to be. And then what did they call this spacecraft? It was called the Japanese Icarus spacecraft, or Icarus. And of course, in Greek mythology, you find out that Icarus was the son of Vulcan. So that, to me, I started saying, okay, there's something here. There is something going on, and we've been sold this sort of this red herring of Nibiru, while meanwhile there's something else that's there we're not being told about that definitely does play into having effects on our planet, causing earthquakes and the rest of this stuff. But because it doesn't tie into the ability to be able to fearmonger that with 2012, I think it's been largely ignored.
So this is a body that is still tied within our solar system, kind of like a planet that is constantly out of range from our point of view.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. But this is, obviously we hear about a lot of different kinds of of bodies. There's a speculation about a brown dwarf. Obviously, this might be it as well, and in that sense.
That's what people believe Elenin is, yeah.
Right. So, what do you make about Elenin, by the way? Do you think that it will herald anything? Will it, does it mean anything bigger, do you think?
Again, it's just one of those things, Henrik. I just don't know. I will say this. At first, I didn't think that there was anything to it. I thought that it was kind of, just speculation. And then one of my listeners had posted a link in my chat room to NASA's website that showed the trajectory of the comet Elenin. And I opened up this link, and it had kind of like a thing you could scroll that would show the trajectory of the comet Elenin and where it would come and how close it would come to Earth and what its trajectory was. And its exact trajectory was, it showed it going right past the Earth and slamming directly into the planet Venus. And I went, oh my goodness, this could be, this could have huge implications if this thing slams into Venus. I mean, this could wreak havoc in our solar system. And then, that was on like Thursday or Friday. And then the following Monday, when I got ready to do my first show of the week and I went back to peruse that information again, Henrik, they had scrubbed that data off of that site and changed the trajectory of the comet Elenin, where it was no longer striking Venus. It was going perfectly between Venus and Earth. And I went, that really doesn't help. The idea that people believe that this comet Elenin is something more than what they're telling it is. And again, at that point, I was kind of skeptical. But once I saw for myself that they had, literally scrubbed that data and changed its path within the matter of just a few days, I became a lot more suspicious about what this is. Again, I don't know. It's all speculation. Anybody that tells you they know for sure what it is I wouldn't trust that. But I think that it is definitely something, Henrik. I just don't know what for sure.
Absolutely. We just have to keep on watching. And my point of view has always been anyway that absolutely we should look into it. We should study it. We should see if there's anything to it. If it's going to be big enough, when if the whole Earth is going to go under, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. Actually, when you think about it, there's nothing we can try to do to make it better. We can run around like headless chickens and worry about it all day, but it's not going to solve anything in that way. And I think that again, all of these things always ends up in that ballpark, if you know what I mean. It always ends up in the apocalyptic eschatological field almost, that this is another doomsday, and it seems to play, if you will, a little bit on people's I don't know what it is, a need, a desire almost in some cases to have this doomsday always looming around the corner. If it's not Elenin, it's 2012. If it's not that, it's the sun is going to explode or supernova or what have you. And again, all of this might be true. All of it might be happening. But I always go back to that idea. If it's so of that large, magnitude, there's not much we can do about it anyway. So why worry about it, if you know what I mean, Josh?
Yeah, and it does seem though, and I think Bramley talked about that in his book, Gods of Eden, but it does seem that throughout history, it's like it's been genetically imprinted into us, this idea of an Armageddon or an apocalypse and all this stuff. And it's been constantly reinforced in culture. And it's been, people have constantly believed that is the outcome. But I think it's just one possible outcome. And, regardless of this information and how deep it is, Henrik, I'm never negative or, think all hope is lost. As long as there are people like you and I out here and others that are continuing to have our minds wide open and look at our elements of this, we stand a chance. I think the biggest thing that is the hindrance to us is when, as soon as we say, there's no way I'll believe that, there's no way I'll believe the elite or whoever could do that. There's no way I'll believe they have this technology. As soon as you say, I could never believe that, they've got you. They've got you right there. Because once you limit your own personal scope of what you believe is possible, they can then, if you can dream it, these people have it. And at the moment when you restrict what you believe is possible, and to me, that's what the conditioning and the media and the programming and the schools and everything are about. They're about keeping our ability to perceive what is possible at a very low level. That's why we're given culture and movies and all these fantastical things and science fiction and told these are all fiction. But yet, 9 times out of 10, 99% of the time when you look at science fiction is many times based in ancient artifacts, ancient texts, things of that nature. So I think that's what it's been. It's been a constant program of keeping the ability of what we can perceive to be real at a very low state.
Absolutely. Many of these things are, if you will, then archetypal symbols in one sense. They represent something that seems to be a part of, in many regards, actually, the dark, mysterious collective unconscious of humanity. Same thing with this doomsday anxiety. I think it's kind of there, hard-coded in us in one way or another. And it's like, we are fascinated by it and kind of drawn to it for various reasons because we want to learn about it, but yet we fear it at the same time. And I think those aspects as well, you can be manipulated, if you will, if you don't understand that those things are there. So again, we're given movies and things like this, but at the same time, there's an incredible world out there where a lot of this stuff is and has been happening, if you know what I mean. So there's where the magic is in reality, not in the fiction, Josh.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, I've had I get my paradigm blown every week, every month. I mean, I'm constantly finding new things that change what I believed the week before, the month before about this stuff. And I think that that's good because it seems to me that a lot of people, I listen to some of these, supposed truther radio shows and stuff, and I hear people talking about the same thing that they were talking about 2, 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago in some cases. Right. And there's no progression there. And I always had a real problem with that. I just always was. That's why I never wanted to be on radio or do any of this stuff, probably any more than you did, Henrik. But I just felt like I didn't have a choice and that there was so much more information that wasn't being given a voice and wasn't being put out there. That was very vital to this stuff. And I think that, I never dreamed it would lead me to uncover the things I've uncovered now and discovering that there is so much more to the world, to all information, to all of this than what you will ever get if you are just following this mainstream culture of the alleged truth movement. I think it's absolutely true.
Absolutely. TheGlobalReality.com. That's your website, Josh. Radio and films for everybody out there to check out. Much more information, obviously, that Josh keeps on putting out all the time. The Secret Right, Volume 1 is out right now. And obviously, as we mentioned, you're currently working on the Volume 2. And do you have any ETA on this at all, Josh? How's it going with the second one, by the way?
Well, we had a bit of a time setback back in May because as we talked about before the show, I just had, as you know, Henrik, I had some deaths in the family, and so that kind of put me back a couple weeks. So we were actually shooting to originally have this out. Yeah, thank you. And we were originally shooting to have this out this month, but it's coming out sometime in August. I don't have an exact release date yet because I'm just trying to see, but I'm really diligently trying to get it out somewhere around the 1st of August. But it will definitely be coming out in August for sure, and I'll definitely make sure you get a copy, Henrik, and able to check that out, and hopefully we can do another show again in the future. I really enjoyed it today. Absolutely.
Let's definitely have you back. There's just so much more to talk about, and I'd love to discuss more in terms of what you uncover here in the next volume of The Secret Right. And people can listen to you on Oracle Broadcasting as well. Is that right, Josh?
Actually, no, I'm not. I'm actually not on Oracle Broadcasting anymore. I actually left that network back in 2009 and started my own network. So, and that's what the Global Reality is. So there at theglobalreality.com, it's also the Global Reality Radio Network. So people can hear stuff 24 hours a day on there. They can actually hear rebroadcasts of some of your shows as well on there, Henrik. I play your stuff, my stuff, and people can go there and check it out. And it's all free. And we just ask that people don't. We don't have commercials. My show is uncensored, so there's a lot of 4-letter and 5-letter words there. But yeah, theglobalreality.com. I don't have sponsors. I don't ask people to buy things from my website. I don't even promote my own films. I just have a chip and banner and a donate button there, and ask that if people want to support our work, they do that. But there you go. I appreciate the opportunity coming on.
Absolutely. The Global Reality with Josh Reeves. Head on over there. Check it out. And, of course, if you like the material and if you want to ensure that Josh can continue his work, click on that donate button as well and help him out. We really appreciate having you on here today, Josh. It's been great, and I hope we can do it again, as we mentioned, and definitely keep me informed and updated on terms of how your work goes on Volume 2, and we'll definitely revisit that at that point.
I absolutely will, Henrik, and I just want to say again what an honor it was for me to be on here on Red Ice. I mean, you just been doing such a fantastic job for the past 4 or 5 years with, just getting all this stuff out, the work you've done with Cesarian, and my listeners have been wanting me to come on this show for a couple of years, and so I really look forward to coming back on with you, and I'd like to maybe try and get you on my show as well, Henrik.
Absolutely. Thanks you again, Josh. Keep up the great work, and we will talk more soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's our program for this time with Josh Reeves. We hope you learned something new and have some new aspects to contemplate as we continue to explore and discover new research and investigation into some of the most important topics at this time. We'll be back in just a few days with more, and we invite you to listen then. In the meantime, have a great day. Thanks to everyone at Red Eyes, Fredrik, Lana, and Elizabeth. And a special thanks to all our members out there that makes this possible. We'll be back with more before you know it. Take care.